The spring morning in the village of Little Overcombe broke clear and sweet, with a faint scent of lilac drifting through the air. To any casual observer, the scene might have appeared almost too perfect. The kind of tranquil English morning one sees painted on biscuit tins and postcards. But Miss Jane Marple had long since learned that behind the loveliest façades lay the most curious undercurrents of human nature. She had been invited to spend a few days at Ashcombe Lodge, a handsome Georgian manor standing on the edge of the village. Its owner, Lady Agatha Wincombe, was an old friend from the days of the Red Cross nursing service during the Great War. Lady Agatha, now widowed and somewhat imperious in manner, had written to Miss Marple saying, "My dear Jane, I find myself surrounded by an atmosphere most disagreeable. Do come and see whether I am losing my wits, or whether something rather dreadful is afoot." Miss Marple, ever curious about the moral complexities of human beings, had accepted at once. When she arrived that morning by motor car, the house looked peaceful, ivy climbing over pale stone, a gravel drive lined with primroses, and the faint sound of a gardener's shears clipping a hedge. Yet something about the stillness struck her as strained. Lady Agatha received her warmly in the drawing room, a stately space filled with antique furniture and an air of restrained wealth. Tea was already laid out, silver service buttered scones and thin cucumber sandwiches. "My dear Jane," said Lady Agatha, her usually commanding tone softened by anxiety. "You must forgive me for troubling you, but I scarcely know whom else to turn to. Two of the young women from the orphanage, the Penrose sisters as they were called, have vanished without a trace." Miss Marple looked up sharply. "Vanished? My dear, how extraordinary. Were they local girls?" "Indeed. They had been under the care of the vicar's wife since childhood. Lovely girls, quiet, industrious, inseparable. Ruth and Clara Penrose. They left the orphanage 3 months ago to work here, as companions to my niece, Eleanor. But 3 nights ago after supper they simply disappeared. No note, no quarrel, no indication of where they intended to go." Miss Marple stirred her tea thoughtfully. "And their belongings?" "Still in their room," Lady Agatha replied. "Everything neatly in place, as though they meant to return before bed. But they never did." It was precisely the sort of case that awakened Miss Marple's sharpest instincts. Not the sensational, but the quietly sinister. As Lady Agatha poured more tea, the door opened and a young woman entered, slender, fair, and dressed in white muslin. Her eyes were intelligent but shadowed. "This is my niece, Eleanor Marchmont," said Lady Agatha. "Eleanor, you've heard me speak of Miss Marple." Eleanor smiled politely. "It's kind of you to come, Miss Marple. My aunt has been quite worried. But I'm sure the girls have simply gone off for a lark. They were very close. I dare say they fancied a little adventure." Miss Marple's blue eyes regarded her quietly. "Perhaps. Though most young women don't leave their sewing half-finished or their savings untouched, if they intend a holiday." Lady Agatha sighed. "I've spoken to Inspector Grayson. He's convinced there's nothing criminal. He believes the girls went to London, perhaps to find work. But I can't rest easy. There's something wrong in this house, Jane." As the afternoon wore on, Miss Marple was introduced to the rest of the household. There was Dr. Lionel Marchmont, Eleanor's husband, a man of grave demeanor and precise speech, who served as physician to the district. His calm exterior could not quite conceal a certain nervous irritation. Then Mrs. Hardwick, the housekeeper, stout and severe, whose eyes flickered uneasily whenever the missing girls were mentioned. Reverend Phelps, the vicar of Little Overcombe, visited during tea. He spoke piously of the Lord's mysterious workings, but his glance shifted restlessly to Lady Agatha's niece whenever she spoke. And finally, there was Mr. Felix Latham, a handsome guest lodging at the manor, a distant cousin, Lady Agatha explained. He was charming, if somewhat idle, with a smile that lingered too long on Eleanor Marchmont. As evening descended, Miss Marple took a quiet walk through the rose garden. The air was cool, the sky flushed with the faint pink of sunset. She paused by the hedge that bordered the orchard, where she noticed a curious thing, the faint impression of 2 sets of footprints, both small, both leading toward the gate that opened onto the lane, but none returning. Her heart quickened slightly. She bent down and saw something glinting near the gate hinge, A small silver locket, its chain broken. Inside was a faded photograph of the two sisters smiling, their faces alight with affection. She closed the locket gently and slipped it into her pocket. When she returned to the house, dinner was being served, roast lamb, mint sauce, and sherry. Conversation fluttered, though Miss Marple noticed how it faltered whenever the topic of the missing sisters arose. Lady Agatha looked pale beneath her powdered cheeks. "You see, Jane, I was right to be uneasy. No one wishes to speak of it, but there's fear in this house. I feel it." Miss Marple's gaze lingered on each face, Eleanor's delicate hands fidgeting with her napkin, Dr. Marchmont's averted eyes, Mrs. Hardwick's clenched jaw, and Mr. Latham's faint knowing smile. As the grandfather clock struck 9, Miss Marple thought quietly to herself, "When two girls vanish without a word, one must ask not where they have gone, but what or whom they may have feared before they left." Outside, a nightingale began to sing in the orchard. Inside Ashcombe Lodge, beneath the veneer of civility, something dark and deliberate stirred. The mystery had begun. The next morning dawned pale and misty, a thin veil of fog hanging over the lawns of Ashcombe Lodge. Birds sang hesitantly from the hedgerows, and the dew clung to the rose petals like tears. Miss Marple sat at the breakfast table, her delicate hands folded neatly over a lace napkin, while Lady Agatha fidgeted with her teaspoon in restless agitation. "I scarcely slept a wink, Jane," Lady Agatha murmured. "I kept thinking of those poor girls. Ruth was so gentle, and Clara rather the livelier one. I can't help but feel something dreadful has happened." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "You may well be right, my dear. Though I have often found that dreadful things, when examined closely, tend to have the most ordinary beginnings. A quarrel, a secret, a lie untold. Human nature is rarely tidy." After breakfast, Miss Marple announced her intention to stretch her legs about the village. Lady Agatha readily agreed, though it was quite clear she hoped her old friend would do far more than stretch her legs. The village of Little Overcombe was a picturesque place, with thatched cottages, a modest green, and a church spire peeping above the elm trees. The morning bustle had already begun, the postmistress gossiping with the milkman, children running to school with satchels bouncing, and old Mr. Briggs sweeping the path before the general store. Miss Marple, walking with her customary unhurried pace, made her way to the vicarage. She had learned long ago that in any village, the vicar's wife knew far more than the constable ever would. Mrs. Phelps, a plump, cheerful woman with quick eyes, welcomed her in at once. "Why, Miss Marple, how lovely to see you. You've come to see about those poor Penrose girls, haven't you?" "Oh, everyone's been talking of nothing else." Miss Marple accepted a cup of tea. "I did hear of their disappearance. They were under your care for some years, I believe." "Indeed," Mrs. Phelps sighed. "Came to us after their parents died in a motor accident. Sweet girls, both of them. Ruth was quiet, took after her mother, they said, and Clara, well, she was a bit of a firebrand, always dreaming of grander things. Still, I never imagined she'd run off. Did they have any friends hereabouts?" "Only each other, really. Though since going to the lodge, I did hear Clara had become rather friendly with someone there. The young gentleman staying with Lady Agatha, Mr. Latham, is it?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled slightly. "Ah, yes, Mr. Felix Latham. Quite the charmer from what I observed." Mrs. Phelps pursed her lips. "That's one word for him. He's always been a bit too smooth for my taste. My husband says he's harmless, but I know the type. The kind that smiles and says nothing good." When Miss Marple left the vicarage, she walked slowly toward the village green, turning over what she had heard. A flirtation, perhaps, the sort that might begin innocently but end in scandal. Still, there was something else about the sisters' vanishing that did not fit such a simple pattern. Two girls do not disappear quietly, leaving all behind, for mere romance. Later that afternoon, she encountered Inspector Grayson outside the post office, a tall, broad man with a red face and a brisk manner. "Ah, Miss Marple," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Lady Wincombe tells me you're poking your nose into the Penrose affair." Miss Marple smiled pleasantly. "Merely taking an interest, Inspector. I find people often tell me things they consider too trivial for the police." Grayson chuckled. "Well, I can't say there's much to go on. No signs of foul play, no letters, no witnesses. The girls could be anywhere, London perhaps. Young women get restless, you know. Miss Marple regarded him kindly. Yes, I imagine they do, though I fancy it is seldom both at once. He frowned. Meaning? Oh, only that one might follow the other. But both leaving at the same time suggests either planning or fear. The inspector shifted uneasily. Fear, you say? Miss Marple's gaze was mild. People vanish for two reasons, Inspector. To seek something or to escape something. I rather think these girls were escaping. When she returned to Ashcombe Lodge that afternoon, the mood within seemed heavier. Eleanor sat by the window, her embroidery lying forgotten on her lap. You've been out, Miss Marple? She asked. Yes, my dear. I walked as far as the vicarage. Such a pleasant morning for it. Mrs. Phelps mentioned that Clara was rather friendly with Mr. Latham. Eleanor's needle froze mid-stitch. Did she? Well, I can't say I noticed. Mr. Latham is friendly with everyone. Indeed, Miss Marple said softly, though friendship can mean different things to different people. At that moment, Mr. Latham himself entered, jaunty as ever. Talking about me, are you, ladies? I hope only in flattering terms, Miss Marple smiled serenely. Merely observing how popular you are, Mr. Latham. Ah, well, he laughed. I try to make life pleasant for everyone. The world's gloomy enough without adding to it. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Quite so. Though too much pleasantness can sometimes make one suspicious, don't you find? He paused briefly, then gave a careless shrug. Suspicious, Miss Marple? Of what, pray? Oh, of human nature, perhaps, she replied sweetly. That evening, as twilight gathered, Miss Marple asked permission to see the girls' room. Lady Agatha led her upstairs, a small, tidy chamber overlooking the orchard. Everything was neat, as if the girls might return any moment. Two beds stood side by side, the coverlets carefully folded. On the dressing table, Miss Marple noticed a single wilted rose pressed between the pages of a prayer book, and beside it, an envelope addressed but never posted. She opened it gently. It was written in Clara's hand. Dearest Ruth, I cannot bear it any longer. He has promised everything, yet I feel something terrible is coming. If I should be gone by the time you wake, know that I did it for both of us. Miss Marple folded the letter slowly. Outside, the evening breeze stirred the curtains. Somewhere in the orchard, an owl called mournfully. Miss Marple turned to Lady Agatha, her expression grave. I rather think, my dear, that this is no mere case of two girls running off. There's deceit here, and perhaps worse. The investigation had truly begun. The following day dawned gray and unsettled, the kind of morning when the air itself seems to carry whispers. The atmosphere in Ashcombe Lodge was strained. Conversations dropped when footsteps approached. Glances darted quickly away. Miss Marple, sitting quietly with her knitting in the morning room, appeared to notice nothing, though in truth, she noticed everything she had learned over the years, that people spoke most freely when they believed one wasn't listening. Lady Agatha, anxious and fretful, had taken to pacing the corridor outside. Dr. Marchmont, his brow furrowed, had spent the morning in his surgery, attending to important patients in the village. Mr. Latham, by contrast, seemed more at ease than ever, whistling as he flipped through the newspaper. His charm intact, at 11 o'clock sharp, Mrs. Hardwicke entered with a tray of tea. Her movements were brisk, but her eyes darted uneasily toward Miss Marple. You've been with the household quite some time, haven't you, Mrs. Hardwicke? Miss Marple asked pleasantly. 14 years, ma'am, since before poor Sir Henry died. A loyal servant, then, Miss Marple said approvingly. And no doubt you knew the Penrose sisters well? The housekeeper hesitated, as well as anyone could. Nice enough girls, though Clara had airs above her station. Always dreaming of something better. Better things have a way of leading young people into worse trouble, Miss Marple murmured. You didn't notice anything unusual before they disappeared. Mrs. Hardwicke shook her head, but her lips tightened. Only that Ruth seemed frightened the day before. I asked her what was the matter, but she said nothing, only that she wanted to go home. I told her, Child, this is your home now. But she looked at me as though I'd said something dreadful. When the housekeeper had gone, Miss Marple sat still for a long moment. Fear again. It was becoming a recurring note in this quiet symphony of deceit. Later that afternoon, she went into the garden, pretending to admire the tulips. Eleanor Marchmont was already there, reading a book, though her eyes were unfocused. "You seem troubled, my dear," Miss Marple said kindly. "Has something been weighing on you?" Eleanor looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm fine, Miss Marple. It's only this dreadful business. My husband says it's all nonsense, that the girls will turn up. But I can't shake the feeling something's wrong. Your husband seems rather nervous, don't you think?" Eleanor hesitated, then lowered her voice. "He hasn't been himself lately. He and Lady Agatha have been arguing about money. There's talk of debts, though no one dares mention it outright." Miss Marple nodded gently. "Money troubles often cast long shadows. Still, I wonder, would he truly harm anyone for such a thing?" Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she turned a page. "Harm? Oh no, surely not. Lionel's stern, but he's good. He keeps secrets. Men often do," Miss Marple said, her tone almost wistful. "Especially when they think secrecy will protect those they love." Before Eleanor could reply, Mr. Latham strolled across the lawn, smiling in his careless, charming way. "A lovely afternoon for gossip, isn't it? What a pity the sisters aren't here to enjoy it. I rather miss Clara's laughter." Eleanor's face turned pale. "You knew her well, then?" He shrugged lightly. "Well enough. She was a delightful creature, though inclined to dramatics. Spoke often of London, the stage, all that sort of thing. I dare say she found the country too dull." Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly. "You make it sound as if she longed to escape." "Perhaps she did," Latham replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But some people can't bear freedom when they find it." When he had gone, Miss Marple rose, brushing a fleck of yarn from her sleeve. "A strange remark, don't you think?" Eleanor stared after him. "He's cruel, Miss Marple. I think Clara cared for him more than he deserved." That evening, after supper, Lady Agatha summoned Miss Marple to her study. "Jane, I've just remembered something odd. The night before the girls vanished, my niece received a telephone call. Very late, after 10. When I asked who it was, she said she didn't know. But I saw her face. She looked terrified." Miss Marple's expression softened. "My dear Agatha, may I speak plainly? I think Eleanor knows far more than she admits. But she is protecting someone. Protecting. Whom?" Miss Marple smiled sadly. "That remains to be seen." At that moment, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Lady Agatha gave a small cry, and Miss Marple hurried toward the sound. They found Mrs. Hardwick in the upper corridor, her face ashen. "It's from the old storage room," she gasped. "The one that's been locked since Sir Henry died." Lady Agatha's face turned white. "No one's been in there for years." Miss Marple fetched a candle, and together they entered. Dust coated the air, and the faint scent of decay lingered. In the far corner, beneath an old trunk, something gleamed faintly. A small silver hairpin. Miss Marple stooped and picked it up. It was delicate, engraved with the initials C.P. Clara Penrose, she murmured. Lady Agatha covered her mouth. "Good heavens, Jane. What does it mean?" Miss Marple studied the floor carefully. "It means, my dear, that someone wanted this room to stay locked. Not because it was forgotten, but because it held a memory best kept buried." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm brewing over the hills. Miss Marple straightened slowly, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. "There is deception at work here," she said softly. "And before this storm breaks, we shall see precisely who has been hiding behind it." The web was tightening, and for the first time, Miss Marple sensed that the truth, when uncovered, would strike closer to home than anyone dared imagine. The storm that broke over Little Overcombe that night was like a furious confession from the heavens themselves. Rain lashed against the windows of Ashcombe Lodge, wind howled through the chimneys, and thunder rolled endlessly across the moors. Inside, the household moved like uneasy spirits, each person withdrawn, each with something unspoken pressing behind their lips. Miss Marple sat by the fire in the drawing room, her knitting forgotten in her lap. The flames danced and hissed as she reviewed, piece by piece, the pattern of the mystery that had unfolded before her. Two sisters devoted to one another, a vanished pair, leaving all possessions behind, a love letter never sent, a locket by the orchard gate, a hairpin in a locked room, and behind it all, fear. She had seen such patterns before, where affection turned to jealousy, duty to deceit and fear to silence. The human heart, she often said, was not unlike the village lanes, winding, narrow, and sometimes leading to the most unexpected places. A soft knock came at the door. Eleanor Marchmont entered pale and trembling, her eyes rimmed with tears. "Miss Marple, may I speak to you alone?" "Of course, my dear, sit down. You look quite worn out." Eleanor sank into the armchair opposite, clutching a handkerchief. "It's been dreadful, Miss Marple. I can't bear it any longer. The lies, the whispering, the guilt." Miss Marple said gently, "Then perhaps it's time to speak plainly, my dear. You know what happened to the Penrose sisters, don't you?" For a moment, Eleanor stared into the fire, silent. Then in a trembling voice she began. "It started months ago. Clara became infatuated with Felix Latham. He encouraged it, of course. He's always been that way, charming, careless. She believed he meant to marry her. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. Then Ruth found out. She begged Clara to end it, said she'd go to Aunt Agatha if she didn't. That night I heard them quarreling outside near the orchard." Miss Marple's eyes glimmered with sadness. "Go on." "The next morning Clara was gone. Ruth was frantic. She kept saying she'd go to the police, that Mr. Latham had done something terrible. And then that very evening, she vanished too. Did you tell anyone?" Eleanor shook her head, tears falling freely now. "Lionel forbade me. He said it would ruin the family name. That gossip would destroy us all. He said the police would make it worse. He made me promise silence." Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Your husband knew then that something had happened to those girls." Eleanor hesitated. He said Clara had taken her own life, that it was an accident of sorts. She'd fallen near the quarry road. He went to fetch her alone and came back pale as death. He said he'd buried her near the old quarry wall, where no one would find her. He said it was merciful, Nan, to protect her name. Ruth must have followed him later and found out. She never returned." Miss Marple sat very still, the storm crackling beyond the windows. "My dear, your husband is not protecting the family name. He is protecting himself." Eleanor gave a small cry. "No, you can't mean—" But Miss Marple raised a hand. "I do not say he killed them in cold blood, but I believe he was involved in both deaths, perhaps unwittingly at first. But fate has a way of punishing deceit." Just then, the door burst open. Lady Agatha stood there, her face ashen. "Miss Marple, come quickly, it's Lionel. He's gone." "Gone? He left the house an hour ago. Mrs. Hardwick found a note. He's gone to the quarry." Miss Marple rose instantly, her face grave. "We must go after him. At once." The rain had eased to a steady drizzle by the time they reached the quarry. The path was slick, the air filled with the smell of wet earth and pine. Lantern in hand, Miss Marple led the way with surprising steadiness for her age. Her eyes fixed ahead. At the edge of the quarry, they found Dr. Lionel Marchmont standing near the drop, his coat flapping in the wind. He turned as they approached, his face pale and drawn. "It's over," he said hoarsely. "I can't bear it any longer. I didn't mean for it to happen." She slipped. Clara slipped and struck her head on the stones. Ruth saw me carrying her. She thought I'd killed her. She ran. And in the storm, she fell too. Miss Marple's voice was calm, though it trembled with pity. "You tried to hide it, Doctor. You thought silence would save you, but silence only deepens guilt." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I was afraid. Afraid for Eleanor, for the family, for myself. I buried them there, beneath the old willow. I thought no one would ever know." Lady Agatha let out a strangled sob. "Oh, Lionel, how could you?" Miss Marple stepped closer, her tone gentle but resolute. "You cannot mend the past, Doctor, but you can end the deceit. Come with us, let the truth be spoken at last." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, as though the weight of years had settled upon his shoulders. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, you're right. By morning, Inspector Grayson had arrived. The bodies of Ruth and Clara Penrose were found where Dr. Marchmont had said, gently laid together beneath the willow by the quarry edge, their hands entwined as though even in death, the sisters could not be parted. Miss Marple stood a little apart, the cold dawn light soft upon her face. "Tragic," she murmured to Lady Agatha, "but such things rarely begin with evil intent. More often they begin with cowardice and a fear of scandal." Lady Agatha's eyes filled with tears. "You've always seen straight to the heart of things, Jane." Miss Marple smiled faintly. It's only observation, my dear. People may change their manners, their clothes, their speech, but not their nature. The truth had come out at last. And though justice would follow, Miss Marple's heart, as ever, was filled not with triumph, but quiet sorrow for the frailty of humankind. The storm passed, leaving the air washed and still. A faint mist drifted across the gardens of Ashcombe Lodge, and the morning sunlight touched the wet leaves, turning each droplet into a miniature jewel. Yet despite the beauty of the day, a solemn quiet lay over the house, the kind of silence that follows confession. When all pretense has been stripped away, Lady Agatha sat in the drawing room, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her once imperious posture seemed bowed, her proud face softened with sorrow. Eleanor sat nearby, pale and distant, her eyes hollow from sleeplessness. On the table between them lay a letter from Inspector Grayson confirming that Dr. Marchmont had given a full statement. He would be charged with concealing deaths and perverting the course of justice. It feels unreal, Eleanor whispered, her voice thin. To think all this time he carried that guilt? He was so distant, I thought it was just his nature. But he was living with ghosts. Lady Agatha sighed heavily. He believed he was protecting us. But lies, no matter how noble the reason, always breed tragedy. Miss Marple, seated by the window, quietly folded her knitting. Yes, my dear. The saddest part of such affairs is that everyone tells themselves they are acting out of kindness. It is never cruelty that ruins people in these little tragedies. It is cowardice. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the gardener's shears clicked rhythmically, trimming the rose bushes that grew along the lawn. Life, it seemed, was beginning to move again, cautiously, as though the house itself were exhaling after a long-held breath. After a pause, Lady Agatha said quietly, "You were right from the beginning. Jane, there was fear in this house, fear, guilt, and silence. You saw it when none of us did." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Oh, I only noticed small things. The unopened letter, the half-folded garments, the quiet dread in Mrs. Hardwicke's eyes. When people try too hard to appear calm, it often means their conscience is not." Eleanor turned toward her, tears welling. "Do you think the girls knew that they were in danger?" Miss Marple hesitated, her expression soft. "I think Ruth sensed something was wrong. She was protective of her sister. Clara, poor child, was too trusting. She loved foolishly, as the young often do, and paid the price of another's weakness." Eleanor covered her face. "I should have spoken sooner. I should have stopped Lionel that night." Miss Marple reached out and laid a gentle hand on hers. "You cannot change the past, my dear, but you can honor the truth now. That is the only reparation one can make for silence." The front doorbell rang then, echoing through the hall. A moment later, Mrs. Hardwicke entered. Her usual stern expression softened. "It's Reverend Phelps, my lady. He's come about the arrangements for the Penrose girls." Lady Agatha nodded gravely. "Yes, show him in." The Reverend entered, removing his hat respectfully. "A sad business, a very sad business indeed," he murmured. "But at least the truth is known, and the poor girls shall rest in consecrated ground. The village will come together for the service tomorrow." Miss Marple inclined her head. "That is kind of you, Reverend. They deserve peace, and perhaps in a small way so does everyone else." The vicar nodded. "Indeed, such tragedies remind us how fragile we are. We must tend to one another with honesty, lest shadows grow in silence." After he left, Lady Agatha rose and went to the window. The orchard beyond was quiet again, the grass freshly green, the willow by the old quarry swaying gently in the wind. "I shall have a memorial stone placed there," she said softly. "They were good girls. Whatever happened, they deserve to be remembered for their innocence, not their misfortune." Miss Marple smiled approvingly. "A wise thought, Agatha. The living forget too easily." Eleanor looked toward her. "You're leaving us soon, aren't you, Miss Marple?" "Yes, my dear. St. Mary Mead is calling, and my geraniums are probably dying of neglect," she said with a faint twinkle. "But before I go, I shall take one more walk in your orchard. Find it helps to see where truth once hid itself. The soil always knows, you see. It keeps secrets only until someone looks closely enough." Lady Agatha managed a weary smile. "How right you are, Jane. I suppose that's what you do best, you look closely." Miss Marple chuckled softly. Oh, I don't know about best, my dear, but I do find human nature endlessly instructive. People may think the world grows more modern, more clever, but hearts remain much the same as they were in our grandmother's day. Pride, fear, love, jealousy. The same old sins, only dressed in different clothes. That afternoon, Miss Marple walked once more through the garden and into the orchard. The storm had left the ground damp, and a faint scent of earth and apple blossom filled the air. She paused by the gate where she had first found the locket. Taking it from her pocket, she brushed it clean and hung it gently upon a low branch of the willow, letting it glint softly in the sunlight. "There," she murmured. "You're home again, my dears." As she turned back toward the house, the church bells began to ring, soft, slow peals that echoed across the valley. The sound was both mournful and comforting, a promise that life in Little Overcombe would go on, as it always had. Lady Agatha and Eleanor stood at the window watching her return, the elder woman leaning on her niece's arm. "She's quite extraordinary," Eleanor said quietly. "Yes," Lady Agatha agreed. "She sees the truth not with her eyes, but with her heart." Miss Marple, seeing them at the window, smiled faintly and lifted her hand in farewell. By the time her carriage rolled away down the lane, the sun had fully broken through the clouds, flooding the countryside with golden light. The mystery of the missing sisters had been solved, but the lesson, as Miss Marple would say, was one that would linger. Human nature, she often reflected, is the one mystery that never truly ends, only reveals itself, one quiet truth at a time. And with that, peace returned to Little Overcombe, a peace hard won and dearly kept.